racial and religious mix is easily exploitable by different countries, and we see a steady build-up of different narratives which is being very cleverly done. It's not obvious propaganda, but it conditions people to think in certain ways, particularly on foreign policy issues, often appealing to a larger racial identity beyond the Singaporean identity. The philosophy is that our politics, it's for Singaporeans to deal with. We can argue, disagree, but ultimately it is for us to decide. Before I deal with the substantive points on this bill, let me also deal with the issue of timing. Some have said there have been no discussions. Why is the bill being put through so quickly? Have there been no discussions? We have been talking about this very seriously for more than 3 years, extensively. So for HIC directions, to refresh members' memory, there has to be online activity where material is published in Singapore. It has to be done on behalf of a foreign principal, and public interest in Singapore is likely to be affected. For PSP designation, the person's or entity's activities must be directed wholly or in part towards a political end, and the competent authority must additionally assess that it is in the public interest for countermeasures to be applied. So I say to this House, this law gives the government a set of tools that can help. It is not a complete defense against foreign interference, but they can help. The bill represents the best balance that we can find between dealing with the risks and providing checks against abuse.
Mr. Speaker, there has been considerable disquiet in some quarters at the speed at which this bill has been presented to Parliament. In March this year, at the Committee of Supply debates, Deputy Speaker Christopher D'Souza inquired what MHA would do to deter foreign influence in Singapore's domestic affairs. The Second Minister for Home Affairs, the Honourable Mrs. Josephine Teo, addressed the query and announced that legislative levers may be needed. I quote, "Given the recent experience of other countries, we need to consider further measures to guard against foreign subversion of politically significant individuals and entities. For example, what levels of transparency in funding, support and leadership are appropriate and for whom?" More significantly, Minister then went on to say, and I quote, "The public has a big part in this to shape proposals and to give the eventual safeguards their strongest support. It is the only way we can effectively deter bad foreign actors from exploiting our vulnerabilities," unquote.
I'll just summarize. Fica will not stop individuals, businesses, and organizations in Singapore from building overseas partnerships, soliciting overseas businesses, networking with foreigners, sourcing for donations, discussing government policies or political matters that affect their businesses with foreign colleagues or business partners, or supporting charities. As long as they are done in an open and transparent manner and not part of an attempt to manipulate our political discourse or undermine public interests such as security. It will also not cover Singaporeans expressing their own views.
Is Fica effective in protecting us much more than all the resources and the laws we have before this? We already have them. They are all there, okay? So I asked the minister, can you point a few examples? We spend a lot of time talking about judicial review. What the minister seems to be saying is, trust me, trust me. I asked two questions with regards to that. The tribunal is appointed by the minister, right, under this Fica. 2, if judicial review can be done in other countries, even with respect to national security issues, why can't we do it?
I assume now, Mr. Leong, we are talking about the same legislation, because the legislation you talked about just now seemed to be a very different one. Do you understand that almost everything you said earlier about this bill is actually untrue and inaccurate? Is Fica effective in protecting us, given all the other resources that the government has at its disposal? And Mr. Leong says, give us examples of Asian countries which have suffered such an attack. So this, again, I mean, I'm not usually at a loss for words, but is the suggestion that somehow because we are Asian countries will not be affected by foreign interference? Is that the suggestion? I would suggest Mr. Leong reads the French report and that he reads the Select Committee report.
What I think did not go well, and I fully acknowledge that, was the HRP. And all the complaints about conveyancing, calling, not getting in, people not getting responses, is not because the beds were totally full, but processes with regard to the HRP was not totally ready. And we were caught by the sudden increase. We were still implementing a pilot program when all this happened. But the team swung into action. The call of public duty kicked in, and everybody is putting heart and soul solving the problem. So day by day, we are seeing improvements, and we'll continue to do so. We have to make HRP work. Then, the great majority of patients who are well, no symptoms, mild symptoms, can recover at home. Then the hospital capacity that we plan for can focus on the 2% that really need help.
My questions are specifically for those who are vulnerable. What if home recovery is the default option, and what if one's resident is just not suitable? For example, some of us, especially in the Central District, we have a lot of rental flats, and there's a lot of sharing of facilities like toilets and living room, and just one door, for everybody to just move into. So what if the homes are just not suitable for home recovery?
HRP is the default provided you meet certain criteria, such as you are younger, you are vaccinated, some not vaccinated but younger too. And therefore, but within this default, while it is the default, it is not rigid. It is important that once a person is notified that he's on HRP, he's also given a phone number to call, what we call a HRP buddy. And if he's not comfortable because of living conditions, or he's living with a vulnerable senior, or children unvaccinated, they can then make the request to say, while I'm asked to go on HRP, can I be taken out to a CCF? And we will try our best to accommodate those requests.
I wish to ask whether the ministry is prepared to consider benchmarks such as the probability and death rate of getting the seasonal flu and dengue fever versus getting COVID in our public comms. This will help allay fears and contextualize the likelihood of getting COVID-19.
Indeed, we do need to communicate the relative risks of COVID-19 infection, getting the infection, and then perhaps risks of complications and severe disease, and put these in context relative to other common diseases such as influenza, or even not so common diseases such as dengue, for the public to understand how they should go about their business when we reach some sort of equilibrium. And we will be putting more information out into the public. But at the moment, we haven't reached that equilibrium yet. And we're in the middle of quite a large wave. And there are very real anxieties around COVID-19. And I think especially for the elderly, the vulnerable, the under-vaccinated.